Welcome back to Sip and Talk.
Great to be here.
So today we're uncorking a discussion on two really big headlines. Feels like they're shaking things up quite a bit.
Absolutely. We've got President Trump's latest tariff talk and what that could mean for the global economy.
Right, that's a huge one. And then there's Elon Musk really jumping into politics more openly. We need to look at what that does to a brand like Tesla.
Yeah, fascinating stuff. And our mission, like always, is to kind of sift through the noise, look at the facts from different angles.
Exactly. We want to help you understand what's really going on, why it matters, without getting, lost in the weeds or picking sides.
Just laying out the context so you can form your own opinions.
Okay, let's kick things off with the tariffs. Trump's vision for U.S. manufacturing. The goal seems pretty clear, right?
Yeah.
Bring jobs back, fix trade imbalances.
That's the stated aim, yes. And the strategy has a few key parts. First, you've got these big tariffs on imports. There's talk of a potential 10% across the board, and maybe even over 60% on goods coming from China.
Wow, 60%. That's significant.
It is. Then there are things like tax cuts, like the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, trying to make it more attractive for companies.
And encouraging them to, what's the term? Reshore. Bring operations back home.
Exactly, reshoring, especially in really strategic areas like semiconductors. That's been a big focus.
Okay, so the idea is make it cheaper, make it better to build things here. So for you listening, the big question becomes, could this actually mean more jobs in your town, your community? Is that the potential upside?
That's certainly the argument proponents make.
Right.
But there's always the flip side, isn't there? When you look globally, the big worry is sparking a trade war.
Right. Trade war sounds dramatic, but the effect can be pretty real. What happens when other countries decide to hit back?
Retaliation. That's the immediate risk. We've seen it before. The U.S. puts tariffs on goods, and then China, the EU, Canada, they respond with their own tariffs.
And that hurts specific U.S. industries, doesn't it? Like farmers, car manufacturers.
Exactly. Agriculture, autos, they often get targeted. And then the crucial question becomes, who actually ends up paying for these tariffs?
Feels like it trickles down to us, the consumers, eventually.
It generally does. There was research, I think, from the National Bureau of Economic Research suggesting the earlier Trump tariffs were already costing American households somewhere between like $700 to $1,000 extra per year.
Ouch. Just hitting costs in everything we buy.
Pretty much. And if these new proposed tariffs go through that 10% on everything, 60% plus on China, that number could jump. Maybe $700 to $1,300 a year extra.
Wow. So it's not just some abstract economic policy. It hits your wallet directly.
Definitely. It acts like a quiet tax, really. And it often hits lower and middle-income families harder, just eating away at purchasing power.
And it's not just households feeling the pinch. What about smaller businesses, the ones that maybe rely on imported parts?
Oh, they're definitely under pressure. Many small manufacturers need imported components to make their products. So higher costs, supply chain chaos, it can be really tough for them.
So even if U.S. steel producers benefit, the company down the road making things out of that steel might be struggling.
That's often the case. The downstream manufacturers see their costs go up. We saw this play out during the U.S.-China trade friction from 2019-2020. The WTO noted it actually slowed down global trade growth overall.
It's like throwing a wrench in the gears of the global economy. So if we really imagine that 10% on all imports plus the huge China tariff, could that genuinely cause like an economic meltdown, as some headlines suggest?
Well, meltdown might be strong, but the potential for major disruption is there. You'd likely see widespread cost increases, meaning inflation, which shrinks everyone's spending power.
Okay, so stuff gets more expensive. What else?
Did you get the retaliation hitting U.S. exports? Think agriculture, tech, chips. If other countries block those, that directly squeezes U.S. GDP, job growth.
And big companies, the Apples, the Boeings.
Their profits could take a hit if their costs go up or their exports drop. That could lead to layoffs, less investment. And you'd almost certainly see jitters, maybe big swings, in the stock market.
So it's a complex web. Costs go up, exports go down, companies struggle, markets react. And beyond the pure economics, there's this whole issue of alienating allies, right? The America First approach. Does it risk leaving the U.S. isolated?
That's a major concern, yes.
Yeah.
If it's not handled carefully diplomatically, it can definitely cause friction. Remember the steel and aluminum tariffs on the EU?
Yeah, that didn't go over well with France and Germany.
Exactly. And in some ways, it might have nudged them to look towards closer ties with China, maybe? Same thing when you pressure allies like South Korea or Japan on military spending. It can wear down trust.
So instead of strengthening alliances against rivals, it could actually weaken them.
Potentially, yes.
Yeah.
It could make it harder to work together on big global challenges, whether it's dealing with China, Russia, or climate change. And ironically, that might end up benefiting those rivals.
We've seen examples of this before, haven't we? China hitting back on soybeans.
Right, soybeans, bourbon. Canada and Mexico had trade friction. Threats against German car makers caused tension. It shows how these things play out in the real world.
Which brings up a point for you listening. How does that kind of global instability affect your life? Maybe beyond just prices, you know?
It's a good question. Now, let's bring this right up to date. There were some pretty significant tariff moves just recently. July 6th to 8th of this year, 2025. What happened there?
Yeah, what's the latest?
So on July 7th, President Trump announced new 25% tariffs targeting Japan and South Korea. They're set to kick in August 1st unless new trade deals are reached.
25% on Japan and South Korea, major trading partners.
And major allies. Plus, notifications went out to 14 other countries, threatening tariffs up to 40% in some cases.
Okay, how did the markets take that news? Calmly.
Not exactly. Initially, U.S. stock futures took a dive. S&P 500 futures were down about 2.5% on the 7th. Big immediate reaction.
But did it stabilize?
It did recover a bit the next day on the 8th. I think investors were kind of waiting to see how negotiations would go, what the real fallout would be.
Let's break it down. Japan, how did they react? Major car makers there.
Yeah, Japan felt it. The yen weakened. And stocks for Toyota, Nissan, Honda, they all dropped significantly on July 7th. Toyota down 4%, Nissan over 7%, Honda nearly 4%.
Wow. And South Korea?
Similar initial dip in their stock market, but they seemed to bounce back a bit quicker on the 8th. Reports suggest they immediately ramped up negotiations with the U.S.
Trying to head it off at the pass. What about TSMC, the giant chip maker in Taiwan? Were they hit directly?
Not by these specific tariffs on Japan and South Korea, no. But it shows how companies are reacting to the overall climate. TSMC is apparently adjusting its plans.
How so?
They're leaning more into their U.S. investments, partly because of U.S. tax breaks already in place, but also delaying a planned factory in Japan. Seems like they're trying to avoid getting caught in future tariff crossfire. It's smart, strategic maneuvering.
Definitely adapting to the landscape. Okay, what about our own tech giants here? Apple, Amazon, NVIDIA. They're global players. How do these tariffs or the threat of them affect them?
They're absolutely impacted. Take Apple. They could face a 25% tariff on iPhones made outside the U.S.
Which is most of them, right?
Historically, yes. So what are they doing? They've announced huge U.S. investments, like $500 billion, and they're boosting production significantly in places like India, diversifying their risk.
It makes sense, Amazon.
Rising costs on goods from China. That hits their bottom line, especially during big sales events like Prime Day.
And NVIDIA. Chips are central to all this.
Yeah. Semiconductor tariffs, or even the threat of them, cause volatility. NVIDIA saw its stock drop, I think, 7% in early July, partly because of worries about Chinese retaliation specifically.
Even Microsoft and Google, they're less about physical goods.
Less direct impact from goods tariffs, true. But they're not totally immune. Microsoft apparently canceled a data center project, citing rising costs, could be materials, construction, all influenced by these broader trade shifts.
It really shows how interconnected everything is. Even the tech titans feel the ripples. Okay, let's shift gears. Topic 2, Elon Musk.
Ah, yes, the Musk factor.
He's always been outspoken, but now he seems to be moving more deliberately into the political sphere. What's this about the American Party?
Right, so reports surfaced, I think, starting back in 2024 via Axios, that Musk was seriously considering forming a political party, sort of center-right, tech-focused, maybe called the American Party.
Has it actually launched?
Not as a formal registered party in the traditional sense, as far as we know. But his political engagement, his endorsements, his platforming of certain views on X, it's definitely increased significantly.
And with Musk, there are always strong opinions. What's the view that sees this as maybe a smart move for him, consolidating power?
Well, the argument from that side is that aligning more explicitly, perhaps center-right, could boost his appeal with Republican voters, certain business groups. That could potentially help Tesla, SpaceX.
And give him more sway on policy. AI, self-driving cars.
Exactly. A stronger voice in shaping regulations around tech, energy. Plus, you can't deny his personal brand is incredibly powerful and tied to his companies. It creates this intense loyalty, almost like Steve Jobs and Apple back in the day.
It's a phenomenon. And some investors seem to stick with him through thick and thin, right? Like ARK Invest.
Yeah, certain tech-focused funds still see him as this crucial long-term innovator. Their confidence seems pretty solid, focused on the disruptive potential.
So it makes you wonder, for you listening, how much does a CEO's politics matter when you're buying a car or even investing? Does it sway your decision?
It's a really relevant question today. But then there's the other side. The critics who say this political activity is actually damaging Tesla?
Damaging how? Brand neutrality, investor trust.
Both, potentially. Tesla is a global company, big markets in China, Europe. A strong, potentially polarizing American political identity could cause backlash there. Boycotts, maybe regulatory hurdles.
That makes sense. Alienating international customers.
And then there's investor unease. Concerns that his political activities, his sometimes controversial tweets or amplification of conspiracy theories, that it's a distraction.
A governance risk. Takes focus away from actually running Tesla.
That's the worry. That it could harm the brand image, reduce focus on innovation and execution. And, in today's climate, some consumers might consciously choose a competitor, Lucid, Rivian, BYD, based on Musk's stances.
Have we seen actual evidence of this negativity, like boycotts or investors pulling back?
There have been reports and analyses suggesting just that, particularly between 2022 and 2024. Some progressive consumers, some funds, apparently did divest or avoid Tesla due to his posts on X.
And the ESG ratings, environmental, social governance.
That's a big one.
Wow.
Major ESG raters, like MSCI, have actually excluded Tesla from certain ESG funds. They cite governance issues, social concerns, often linked directly to Musk's public statements and actions.
That's pretty telling. Okay, fast forward again to early July 2025. Musk announces this American Party idea more formally. What happened to Tesla's stock right after?
It took a significant hit. The announcement was around July 5th. On July 7th, Tesla stock dropped almost 7%.
7% in one day. That's huge market value loss.
It was. Reports estimated it wiped out something like $79 billion in market cap. Musk's personal stake alone dropped by nearly $15 billion.
Wow. What was the general feeling on Wall Street? Were analysts worried?
Definitely disappointment expressed by analysts. And surveys, like one from CNBC, showed a huge majority, like 85% of investors polled, felt his political stuff was having a negative impact on the business.
85%. That's overwhelming.
It is. And adding another layer of complexity, there were even reports that President Trump threatened to cut federal subsidies to Musk's companies. That kind of political risk adds another level of uncertainty for investors.
So pressure from multiple political angles. What about the long-term shareholders, the ones who've been there for the ride? Are they getting nervous?
It sounds like it. Reports suggest growing frustration. Calls for the board to step in, ensure Musk stays focused on Tesla's business fundamentals.
Which leads back to that question for you, the listener or investor. How much weight do you give the CEO's personal brand and politics in your decisions?
It's becoming a harder question to avoid. So looking at Tesla overall, is investor confidence holding steady, or is it starting to fray?
Yeah, what's the balance sheet look like on confidence?
It's complicated. On the flip side, you still have Tesla's innovation, self-driving tech progress, energy solutions, and Musk himself still has that powerful image as a visionary for many loyal fans.
But the minuses.
Slower growth in new car sales recently, much more competition, especially from companies like BYD globally. And then all the things we've discussed, the political distractions, the controversies, the polarizing effect he has.
So it's a real tug of war between the core business potential and the, let's call it the Musk volatility factor.
You could put it that way. And don't forget the broader global context. U.S. manufacturing policies might help Tesla domestically, but U.S.-China tensions, trade barriers, those are huge risks for a company with factories and sales worldwide.
It really highlights how tangled economics, politics, and even individual personalities have become, which leaves us with a big thought to chew on.
What's that?
Well, in a world where being neutral seems increasingly difficult, how do global brands navigate this? Do companies, and maybe even consumers, just end up choosing sides based on values? Are we heading towards a more fragmented global market?
That is a fascinating and, frankly, critical question for the future.
Yeah.
How do brands survive or even thrive when the middle ground seems to be shrinking?
Definitely something to ponder. We've covered a lot today. from potential trade tremors to these really interesting shifts in brand identity tied to politics.
Hopefully breaking it down helps you think through all the information flying around.
And just a reminder, here on Sip and Talk, we always try to give you the facts, show different viewpoints. We're not here to endorse anyone or anything.
Our goal is just to encourage you to think for yourself about these really big, impactful topics.
So if you enjoyed sipping on these ideas with us, please hit that subscribe button wherever you get your podcasts. We'd love to have you back.
Definitely. And hey, check out our friend Mickey's YouTube channel, Mickytolife.
Oh, yeah. Mickey's got some great stuff. Fun memes, music, wine reviews, travel vlogs. Seriously entertaining.
Worth a watch, for sure.
And finally, what's out there that you think we should talk about next? What's new? What's interesting?
Send us your ideas. Your questions always spark the best conversations.
Absolutely. Until next time.
Keep sipping, keep talking, and stay informed.